Hello, hello. I'm so happy today to have Jonathan Quinn, the Global VP of Marketing and Sustainability at Accredo Packaging. Jonathan, you may not know this, but flexible packaging has been an absolute obsession for me for over 10 years. And I've had so many failures that it's just amazing. So I'm excited to learn from you, and thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
No, thank you for being here. And I'm very excited to hear that there is somebody else that is obsessed with flexible packaging like I am.
Yeah, I don't know how much, if we can compare our obsessions, because
Yeah.
yours apparently starts way before mine. And it's so wonderful to hear that you grew up with packaging. So tell us more about that, the influences from your folks, and how that shaped your thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's people oftentimes when you ask them, well, how did you find packaging? And people often say, well, I met somebody or there was a job or whatever. And they usually are once you're in it, you stay with it. And it's hard to escape. But for me, I was didn't really have a choice. I had a choice, but I was born into it. So I have pictures of me in a box of resin. When I was 2, I was in the lab doing testing on films before I could tie my shoes. So really, it was an opportunity for me that I got because my dad is in the industry, and I grew up around the flexible packaging industry, and have it's had me since the very beginning. Nobody probably will ever want to go to a grocery store with me if they've ever been, because that's the same characteristic that I learned from my dad. He was never allowed to go to the grocery store because every excursion to the grocery store ended up taking hours, because it was always about inspecting packaging, looking for new opportunities, and that's the same that is true for me. But I also went to school, studied packaging and business at Clemson. That was my dream growing up, and it is it is weird, but I have to just now in this conversation have to reflect back that I'm living out my dream, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so I have to actually have my wife hear this part of the initial spiel that you've given, because she gives me so much grief about me walking the aisles of supermarkets because
Yeah,
it is like that. And the other
yeah,
side, I'm sure you go through this, a present would arrive, and I'm only interested in the wrapper. I'm not interested in what is inside. I come from the
yep,
pulp and paper background, so I'm putting it up in the light and seeing how the formation is,
yeah,
etc., etc. And then she's just like, "Oh my gosh, can you stop? And can you actually not spend an hour in the grocery market?" But I'm like, I have to look at how this
yeah.
whole packaging is evolving. So there's so much parallel there. But you mentioned that it was you were literally born into it. But we can go either direction, right? Lots of people
Hmm.
don't want to do what their parents are doing. So what
Yeah.
was it about your father that made you so clear that this is the direction you want to head?
So there's two main things that I would say that drove me into it. And it's the single most important thing to all of this to me, and that's people. I saw the people that my dad was interacting with, the relationships that he had with people, and that he still has to this day. And those same people have had a profound impact on me and my career. People are what is most important to me, and that's what also makes this industry so great. But the other thing for me, and it's similar to when we talk about the grocery store, and similar to when you talk about whether it's pulp and paper materials or whether it's flexible packaging or plastic packaging, at the end of the day, plastic packaging, flexible packaging, and all forms of packaging make the everyday life of the everyday consumer possible. And that's really what we have an opportunity to do as being a part of the industry, is to legitimately take a step back and look and say, we collectively are making the everyday life possible. And that's something that not everybody can say. Not going to call out any other industries by name, but packaging. I mean, if you just ask somebody, how many times did you come in contact with flexible packaging by breakfast? There's multiple different examples that are very, very true. And that's what I think has captivated me and really has driven me to be so passionate about it. But I think ultimately now, looking at where my role is today and my role, particularly as it pertains to sustainability, was looking back at opportunities to beat my dad, to do more than my dad. And if you look back in the late 80s and through to the early 2000s, sustainability wasn't a conversation. Was flexible packaging enabling sustainability? Yes. But doing it and being methodical and being very focused in regards to sustainability, and that's what I see as and what has continued to energize me about being so excited about the industry is how sustainability and how flexible packaging enables sustainability for the everyday consumer.
It's so interesting that you mentioned this, and there's a bunch of thoughts that went through my head as you were kind of
Mm-hmm.
speaking. Because, when you talk about modern lifestyle, you're so right because it's so shaped by packaging, and it's actually magic material. You can open a bag of crisp chips
Yeah.
6 months after they've been manufactured, and they are as crispy, and the smell is as good as they were made yesterday. And that
Yep.
enables a certain amount of thinking. The shelf life that has been created is a certain, it's basically because of the packaging that has been evolved. It's literally like
Mm-hmm.
a magic material. One of the things, and I of course come from also from the obsessive space of how do we leave the planet cleaner, and you
Yes.
are working in that domain as well. But one of the things that there was a guy from General Mills who actually, I'm forgetting the name, but very interesting. He taught me about 10 years back when I was talking about my string of failures. Um, because I was trying to sell this idea that we must become more compostable, sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And he just looked at me and laughed. I said, okay, what? And he was like, do you understand the kind of impact, environmental impact that we will make if your packaging did not work? I was like,
Yes.
huh. And he said, think of the whole chain of potato chips. The
Mm-hmm.
growing of the potatoes, the farming, the amount of energy that needs, the sorting, the cold storage, the
Mm-hmm.
the, the, the actual process of chopping and rejecting and frying and energy and if a bag doesn't have the right seal strength, just simple thing like that,
Yeah.
the environmental impact of that is huge. So I'm
Yes.
interested in knowing your perspective on that thought, and because you mentioned this in terms of sustainability, and then of course we can dig a little bit deeper on other
Yeah.
sustainability aspects.
Yeah. I mean, I think he was highlighting the overall significant environmental impact that is food waste, and the ramifications for food waste are tremendous. And if you drew a comparison between, excuse me, developing countries versus the developed countries. So in developing countries, the majority of the food waste happens before the product reaches the consumer. In developed countries, the food waste happens after it reaches the consumer because of efficiencies mainly associated with manufacturing, but also transit packaging and a number of things that play a role there. But food waste is the biggest and greatest challenge that we have in front of us. I think you kind of highlighted a perception that probably many consumers have. And that perception is that there should be a better way, or there should be a way that we can do or eliminate packaging and not need packaging, or we should just make all packaging out of paper. But what we need to understand is there's a science and factual based reasoning behind material selection and packaging format selection. I'm probably a plastic loyalist, but what I will say is that there is opportunities for plastic to be replaced. There is opportunities for material swapping, call it. But what we need, consumers, and what we collectively all need to understand is plastic enables a lot of those products to be on the shelf today, and enables those products to be on the shelf because of the technical value that it provides. And that's basically around shelf life and sanitation, but also containment, a number of things. But primarily, it's that shelf life, and it's keeping things sanitary, clean, and protected. And the consumer oftentimes loses sight of that critical point.
Yeah, the other spiel that I've been making, again, you kind of inferred to it in a way, is that in an ideal world, no packaging is the best packaging, because all we need to do is to actually take care of our health, and the health of the planet will be okay. Because, if you eat more processed food, then you're going to have a bigger challenge with your health. And if you eat fresh food, which is less packaged, you might do better. I don't know what you think about that kind of thinking.
Sorry, it cut out. It cut out for a second, and I missed the first part of the question.
Absolutely. I'll go again. So
Okay, perfect.
the other spiel I've been giving to people is that the best packaging is no packaging. And if we take care of our own health, the planet's health will be fine. Because
Hmm.
in that case, we will eat less processed food. And
Hmm.
that means that, typically if you're eating more fresh food, it comes with lesser packaging. So what is your take on something like
Yeah.
that?
So this is, I'm gonna give my younger brother a little bit of a plug here. So as I said earlier, I went to Clemson, and I studied packaging and business. My brother also followed, and he went to Clemson and studied packaging. And he will always say his mission is to work himself out of the job, out of a job, because that's his hope, is that we're not going to need packaging. We don't need packaging because of for a variety of different reasons. I say the flip side is that I believe that packaging will always be something fundamental, that we will always need packaging. Um, but I think that we can all strive to create opportunities for there to be less packaging, or packaging that is enabling sustainability. And ultimately, by enabling sustainability in the circular economy, um, the environment is in a better place. Um, it, I would say, the particular with products that are those natural and organic, those are oftentimes the products that need packaging the most. And those are the ones that don't have the preservatives and additives to combat oxidation or combat moisture pickup for whatever reason. Now, I'm not necessarily am I sitting here as a proponent for any of those additives or anything like that, but just saying that there is a price to pay to be able to have that, and to have those truly 100% organic products. And that's where packaging enables you as a consumer to have those products, and for the shelf life of those products to be recognized and realized. And one of the things, and early in my career, I worked for a company that made oxygen absorbers, moisture absorbents, active packaging technology. And we developed a campaign called Clean Label Technology. So people would say clean label technology, like you make clean labels. No, we develop solutions that extend the product shelf life without having to add additives that none of us can pronounce. And that really is tied to the absorption of whether it was oxygen or moisture or other gases, call it, in certain situations, that happen in those those products. And that's one of the things that, again, the consumer, if you look at beef jerky, for example, and there was just an example of this on LinkedIn a few days ago, where somebody had a bag of that should have been beef jerky, but it was just all the small packets on the inside that say "do not eat," and everybody assumes that those are silica packets. Those aren't silica packets, and they're not there for moisture. They're there for oxygen, and they're there to absorb oxygen, to extend that the actual product shelf life. And there's actually no silica on the inside. It's actually iron, which iron then oxidizes and absorbs the oxygen. And anyway, point being is there's those same reasons of why you want to go down that path of natural and organic. You actually need packaging more in those instances than you may believe.
Oh, that's a great clarification. Did not think of it like that, extending shelf life of things that don't have enough preservatives in it. I want to actually delve a little deeper on your move towards more and more sustainability. So you're a
Mm-hmm.
good packaging guy. Your dad did flexible packaging. You
Yeah.
went into it. What is it in you that you wanted to? Is it market forces, or is it something within you, or is it a combination of both that you've gone ahead and focused on building more and more sustainability into your role?
Yeah. So um, it comes down to three things. And I can't say that there are three things. They're three people. But if you see over my shoulder is two of my kids, and now I have three kids since that picture was taken. But I want my kids to be proud of their dad and the industry in which their dad was a part of, their brother, their uncle is a part, and my dad is a part was a part of, and actually my grandfather was a press operator, so he was a part of it as well. I want them to be proud of what we're doing to enable their future. I want them to be proud and to be able to say that, hey, my dad helped do that. The flexible packaging helped us have this and helped the environment be better because of it. That's, I would say, probably my top goal. Um, but I think also, because I went to school for packaging, and because I've then, over the course of the past 10 years, you've really seen materials be villainized, and plastic be one of them. And really wanting to seek out the opportunities and create the opportunities to showcase why material selection is so critical. And but also push the envelope, push the limits of what plastic can do today, and how can we do it tomorrow in a better, in a more positive, environmentally positive way. And that's hard to do. That plastic is an incredibly sustainable product for all the reasons that I could name off. Um, but because it already is there, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of innovation, it takes a lot of, number one, what it all takes is partnership. And so that partnership aspect of being able to collaborate across the supply chain in order to enable sustainability is one of the things that I would say is also a primary pull, or why I've been, and why I am so passionate about sustainability, is being able to work with one of the things that we talked about, or I talked about earlier, is what's so important to me is people, and it's coming together with people to enable sustainability and to enable the overall environment to be better and make a positive impact.
I think it's for humanity itself. I think it's so important to have people like yourself who understand packaging deeply and are trying to kind of take it to the next level in a way to find better products and to move in that direction. And that takes me back to your education. You went to a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful university, studied packaging, but within that, what I find is that you went ahead and did a year, or I don't know if it was an exchange with Dalian University of Technology in China. And
Yeah.
that's a well-known university as well. But why that, and why China? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I will tell you. So I did my study abroad time in Dalian, and I've always really loved and welcomed the opportunity to learn from people who've lived, who are in a different part of the world, who have a different perspective, because it, number one, I should always be appreciative that I'm an American and I grew up here, but we're only one country, and we're only one group of citizens, call us, and there's so much more out there. And when I got the opportunity to go to Dalian as a part, so I was there as a part of the executive MBA program, but I was an undergrad student, and then we were integrated as a part of at Dalian, at the school there, and it was a tremendous opportunity. And that also, it's why I did during my school, I did my packaging co-op, and I did kind of a 4 or 5 month stint in the UK, and then another 3 months in the Netherlands. And that was a tremendous opportunity because it I think you may have done a work study program of some sort, and when you're an intern, you're always learning. Everything is new, everything is different, and it's a great opportunity. But to be able to do that and do that in a different country where I was learning at work, but I was learning outside of work just as much as I was learning at work. And I think that learning and that ability to build relationships with people from all different walks and all different perspectives is something that I've always wanted, and that was something that was really important to me. And I forever will remember my time in Dalian.
Yeah, and my wife and I are absolute nomads. So we talk about the amount we've learned from travel and experiences like yourself. You've, of course, gone ahead and gone deeper in terms of really spending a lot of time. But the first thing we do in the beginning of the new year is that where are we going to travel this year?
Hmm.
Where are we going to spend at least 2 months of the year, in a different place, in a different surrounding, even working from there, but being in a different surrounding, because I think it puts you, like you're saying, it puts you in a place where you don't know what is going to come next. So, and that enables so
Yeah.
much learning. But you also speak Spanish. How did that come about? High school Spanish is one thing, but I believe you're fluent. So how did that happen?
No, no, no. My Spanish is about as good as my Chinese, probably.
Ah, okay, okay.
Uh,
And
but
that means you're at the master's level in the
no, no. I've got and because I haven't been able to, I haven't had the regular utilization, call it, of either. I have a hill to climb. We'll just say there, but yeah, no. It was through high school, and it was through also through I mean part of that conversation about people and my dad who exposed me. I mean, there's a guy named well, there's two people, Javier Turpin and Augie Rojas, were two people that worked for my dad. And I got my first education in Spanish from Javier. So that happened at a very, very young age, and that's, I think, probably one of the things that I will always owe my dad is the people that he exposed me to really shaped me to who I am today. And that Spanish aspect is part of it.
Yeah, so I hope it keeps coming back as you go more international and explore
Yeah.
more. But let's switch to packaging, back to packaging, and
Hmm.
then to Accredo. Talk to us a little more about what Accredo does, and a little bit about your journey to Accredo as well, please.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, I'll do the little bit of the journey, and then I'll cover kind of Accredo at the API group of companies, because that's as somebody that's in packaging, but also somebody that's in marketing and somebody that's in sustainability. It's a really exciting story that I get to tell. And being in marketing, telling stories is what it's about. Telling true stories is what it's about, I should say. But yeah, like we discussed, my journey from Clemson. I was in was given. Well, I graduated from Clemson in not the greatest time to enter the workforce. I graduated in December of 2008, which was just as the global economy had it had all hit the proverbial fan. But I took on an opportunity to be a regional sales manager for a company that made scientific instrumentation for the packaging industry. And then I transitioned it to that company that was in active packaging. And I've always been on the commercial side of things, and I've had some other global sales roles and global key account, multinational account manager roles, traveled the world, and then transitioned into marketing when I went to work for Nova Chemicals in their polyethylene business about 8 years ago. And then the world kind of really opened up for me there. I think that was a launching point for my career, because I found a sweet spot. I found a sweet spot that I really was able to have an impact and do things a little bit differently. And then after over 5.5 years there, I had an opportunity to go and be a part of starting up a business within a broader business, but really starting up a business at Pregis and building out their the performance flexibles side of or that business unit, which was tremendously gratifying. I mean, we didn't even have a company name at that point. And I mean, it started from the bottom and building out and commercializing that. And I will say the decision to leave Pregis was one that I will always say was probably the hardest decision I've ever made in my life, because I had put so much time, energy, and effort and built out the collaboration and partnership, and really the business was beginning to commercialize at the level we had expected. But this opportunity to come and be a part of Accredo and to build off of what the family started was one that I couldn't pass up anymore. And I say that it was very hard, but what has me so excited and why I'm so passionate about Accredo and the API group of companies. So because I have responsibility for all of the API group of companies, but this business was ultimately started by Vietnamese refugees that escaped the fall of Saigon, came to the U.S. to pursue the American dream. It was 12 siblings, 11 brothers and one sister that came.
That's a big family.
Yeah. And now, I mean, it was 1986 when they realized they came here and they were in the fishing industry, and they decided they didn't really want to be on the water, and so they went down the path of supplying bags for the fish and shrimp industry, and made bags, traditional grocery store bags and similar, and really grew that business. And today we're the second largest producer of grocery bags in the world. And then they pivoted and said, we need to diversify. And they went down the flexible packaging, vertically integrated flexible packaging converter route, leveraged what they knew on extrusion, but entered in a whole new realm with printing and converting. But what really sets this story apart is the vision that they had in that 2008, 2009, and focus and emphasis on sustainability. When people weren't talking about sustainability remotely close to the realm that they are today, at that point, they made the transition to 100% wind-powered facility, manufacturing facility, LEED Silver certified manufacturing and office facilities. We're the only LEED Silver certified flexible packaging company in North America, if not that I know of in the world, which is tremendous because LEED Silver certification is not something that you just do. You have to do it from the beginning, meaning you have to source the materials from a given geography. You have to do a lot from an infrastructure building, a tremendous amount of things. And they did that before it was even thought or talked about, really. And then in 2019, opened a Accredo Asia in Vietnam, which is solar powered. And it's almost a mirror image as far as the machinery and the layout that we have in Sugarland, Texas. But again, being very forward looking and very focused on sustainability. And when I say sustainability is fundamental and foundational to who we are, it is. And we've been and have the track record to prove it. And there's nobody in the industry that can say that they're 100% wind powered. That's really powerful. And as we look to companies making and people being held accountable for their scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, and our ability to impact and have a significant impact on our customers, scope 3, that's going to create another competitive advantage, I truly believe. And ultimately, our ability to help our customers achieve their goals is really what it's about, and how we can help all those that are part of the call it the supply chain to be better. Accredo, the API group, Advanced Poly Bag, which is the grocery bag business, and then we have another reusable bag business as well. I mean, all of these things they add up, and you sit back and you say, "Wow, like this family did something right," and the vision that they had 15, 20 years ago. It's pretty impressive, and now to see it all come to life, and as we're entering that second generation of the family. I say I'm incredibly lucky to be able to work alongside of with that second generation, and I truly believe that the best is yet to come, and this next chapter is going to be the most exciting chapter in the API group and Accredo's history.
I'm glad you told us this story because now everything comes into perspective. Because I was thinking, when I was looking at Accredo, I was thinking, why is there so much focus on sustainability? And in terms of sustainability, I'm moving more to the products in terms of recyclability and compostability, because that's not something that comes up right up front, even when I look at bigger flexible packaging kind of
Mm-hmm.
groups. And it's not I'm you and I both go to various exhibitions, and it's not top of their minds even now. But I can see that coming from this pedigree of thought, where the thought is even being provided to the kind of energy we are going to use, the kind of buildings we are going to make, and the kind of future we are going to create. And I want to pivot to the products, because that's very interesting as well, because I guess most of our listeners do understand packaging, and they probably understand how complex flexible packaging is. But I'm going to start with recyclability, because that's a tough one in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Yeah.
can switch to compostability later, because especially what you were talking about before in terms of air and moisture ingress. Most of, and I know that you guys have like a 9 layer machine. So layering is really important.
Mhm.
Metallization is really important, which creates multiple substrates. And that means the recyclability is compromised in many ways. So talk to us first about, how you guys went about creating a
Yeah.
recyclable, flexible pack. And
Mhm.
is the application pretty ubiquitous, or is it specific to certain usages where the barrier needs may be a little lower?
Yeah. So this is it's a great question, and it's when you look at who was the originator. Um, the Accredo was the first company to offer a recyclable stand-up barrier pouch in North America. They were the first. Um, that is it ties to the question of like how or why is sustainability so at the forefront. What and that's really what it was. But it was, I think, at the time, maybe there were rumblings about sustainability, but that was where the family and the leadership at the time saw this is our opportunity to create a spot for us. And we've quickly grown, and but it's all been organic growth. We've not had any growth by acquisition. And so why I say that is that people began to gravitate towards sustainability, and we've continued. Now, do we have products that are non-recyclable? Yes. Do we have traditional mixed material films? Yes. Um, Now, do we have opportunities to transition those for some of the customers? Yes, but those are all part of their material selection, and materials are selected for various reasons, but they're selected for operational efficiencies. There's a reason why mixed material is more cost effective. It runs faster. All those things. But to your point in regards to, is recyclable barrier packaging broadly applicable? And the answer is yes. Now, is there some applications where it's going to be pretty difficult, where shelf life will be impacted? Um, of course. But is there a tremendous number of opportunities today where um, some of there's a lot of, we'll call it low hanging fruit. But again, to my previous point, that's the hard part, is creating and developing packaging solutions, plastic packaging solutions that stretch that limit, that we're able to find new ways to enable that and deliver that same shelf life. I would say is one of those ongoing things. But the shelf life and the conversation around barrier, there's the materials that are used to provide that barrier are oftentimes used for other things, like abuse resistance and toughness of films. While they provide barrier, but there's also a toughness that's needed. So there's other things that play into the conversation, and there's things like heat, for example, and heat resistance, and um, those all play into this whole mono versus mixed material. But there's a ton of innovation going on machine direction orientation MDO films, which is a new integrated process of making blown film to give different performance related characteristics. There's biaxial oriented polyethylene, which there really hasn't been much of that, but now that market is expanding. And so there's a lot of new technology that's coming, and it's not, there's no silver bullet. And I always say, if anybody walks into a room and say they have the silver bullet to solving all the challenges within sustainability, you can tell them to walk right out the door that they walked in, because nobody's got a silver bullet. But there's a bright future already. There's so much that can be done, but I truly believe in the innovation and development that's coming, and that we're all a part of.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the silver bullet piece. I don't think there will be multifarious kind of solutions that hopefully will come together to provide us, like you said in the beginning, that future for our children, and us to leave the planet a little cleaner than what you and I have found. Staying
Mm-hmm.
with recycling, and I am really interested in as much as you can share in terms of creating the right. I guess it has to be a mono layer, but I guess it could be multiple or mono substrate, but multiple layers in order to be able to
Correct.
create the kind of barriers that are needed. Uh, that's one part of it. How do you do it? And the second part of it is you mentioned that not every application can be tackled, but what would be the low-hanging fruits where you would have an easier time with the customer to say, okay, guys, at least let's shift to a recyclable substrate, and people are more
Mhm.
accepting of that.
Yeah. I mean, so there is people that oftentimes get confused, which when you talk about a mono material, it's not a, some people call it a mono layer. It's not a mono layer structure. It is actually, you would want more layers, but of the same material, same polyethylene material. But also the thing that, I mean, this is a very widely well known industry standard as far as um, traditional applications, barrier applications use nylon, which nylon is in most, if not all cases, is not recyclable. Where you go down the path of EVOH, which is utilized and is able to provide barrier and some of those other performance related characteristics, abuse resistance and toughness, but still, if done at a level which doesn't get above a given percentage of that structure, that film would be deemed as recyclable. So there's a number of different applications, but one of the applications that I quickly go to is something like granola or cereals or pet treats or nuts and seeds or snack mixes like that. I mean, just things that are quickly could make that transition. The toughness and abuse resistance is easily capable, and the shelf life is feasible as well. Those are some of those things that I see as low hanging fruit, but it's other things like traditional laundry detergent pods that come in a stand up pouch of some sort, or dishwasher pods, things like that, which really it's about protecting moisture. But what people sometimes don't know is it's also protecting the odor, and it's the odor which we all like, the smell of those soaps, but it's keeping that from escaping and transferring next to the products that it may be close to on the aisle, or it may be close to in transit. Or if we could all smell all the laundry detergent pods that were on the grocery store aisle, it would be overpowering. And so that's part of those things. But those are all part of that material selection. But the other big part is that operational efficiency and making sure that you're enabling those films to run and seal on equipment the same as others. So Yeah, hopefully I've answered your question there.
Oh, absolutely. But of course, digging a little bit deeper, and because you mentioned aroma, what I'm told is that aroma, when it comes to monomaterials, the kind of substrates, aroma is easier to hold in a plastic kind of
Hmm.
polyethylene substrate than moisture. Why is that? Why is moisture more difficult, and why do you need like a metal layer? Is that the porosity? What is it that causes that, and how have you overcome it in your recyclable pouches?
Yeah. So the it and this is I believe it to be associated with the molecule size. Um, so liquid moisture molecules being bigger than oxygen. I think I'm explaining that correctly, but it has to do with that. Um, that this is the most technical and in depth question I've ever been asked on a podcast. I have to admit, and but that's the explanation that I would give. Now, if the fact checkers are out there and they wanna tell me otherwise, they that may be the case, but ultimately it has to do with that.
That's interesting. Yeah, must be like it makes sense that if the size of the molecule is smaller, it can probably escape a little bit easier, and
Yeah.
hence, and it could also be the material, the structure of that, and somehow the metal seems to be able to retain the
Hmm.
moisture side, and that's the challenge many of us face. Like you guys have clearly overcome that challenge by some sort of innovation where you're not having to use multiple substrates and you're using multiple layers
Hmm.
instead. And I see on your website that there's like a 9-layer machine. That's a lot of layers,
Yeah.
Jonathan. So,
Yeah.
so is
Yeah.
that also in kind of service of this idea that you're going to create a mono substrate structure, or does is that needed for certain complex applications where the requirements are much more stringent? How does a 9-layer structure help?
Yeah. As far as the need for nine, there's three, five. There's it goes in increments, but there's we have um, we have a an array of offerings, um, but the traditional, call it barrier, um, recyclable packaging is traditionally you're going to find it's a combination of films, but the barrier film is most likely a 7 or 9 layer structure, depending on the desired or the required performance characteristics. But that's also plays into that conversation I mentioned earlier about MDO film and machine direction oriented being able to do even more with a 9 layer film, or being able to do even more with a 7 layer film that you could only do maybe with an 11 layer film, just for example purposes, um, in providing different functional performance characteristics while still having that same barrier properties. So um, it's it's amazing where the world of blown film extrusion has come over the course of the past 30 years, even after over the course of the past 10 years. What was a very there was numerous people required to run a blown film line years and years ago, and now you can do it with a much less of a workforce, but the overall performance that blown film extrusion provides is has been tremendous.
And what about metallization? Like I'm told there is transfer metallization, there's vacuum metallization. Does that also make the product different from each other, or is just a methodology?
Um, I think that an array of implications associated with metallization, and there's an array of needs associated with why metallization is needed in various applications. There's also been a tremendous amount of differentiation or improvements that have been made associated with metallization and recyclability. But ultimately, metallization is used for providing barrier or providing those ability to seal really quick, to run products really quick, but mainly from the moisture standpoint of being able to provide that moisture ingress and moisture protection.
Sorry, I'm going to just expand on the question. So I was
Mm-hmm.
wondering, there's two kinds that I know of: vacuum
Yeah.
metallization, where you condense the metal on the film, and there is transfer metallization, where you laminate. My
Mm-hmm.
question is, like, does that make a difference in the kind of barrier that you're going to get, the system itself, or is just a different mechanism of metallization?
From my perspective, there's a difference in the performance related characteristics that it provides, vice versa, and the robustness of what it can provide um, is what I would tell you today. Um, but that is one of those areas that has been new for me. I haven't necessarily played a significant amount of my career in that area. So I'm by no means am I an expert in it, but it's definitely has its place in flexible packaging. It definitely has its place to play, and there's been a ton of innovation that has taken place in both. But but I think we all collectively still have a long way to go because that's the way I am.
Yeah, no, no, I'm sure there is, yeah, but and it's good to hear. I'm sure there is performance characteristics that come with it, and performance can be both, right? It could be the end product performance, and it could be the conversion performance. Both
Right.
matter, and it would be different in different kind of processes. Okay, I'm going to switch to my favorite part, which is because I'm amazed that, when I'm looking at your compostable structures, it's beautiful to see that you guys can actually come under one WVTR, or water vapor transmission rate, or
Hmm.
moisture vapor transmission rate, and one OTR, which
Hmm.
is really impressive performance. And how did that come about? I'm sure it took a lot of R&D and innovation to be able to build those structures and to actually be able to have a possibility of commercializing them. And so how did that come about, and how are you kind of being able to market it, and how's the acceptability in the market for compostable films?
Yeah. So when it comes to the technical aptitude and depth to enable that product, it really shows true to the guts that of Accredo that has me so excited. And when I say guts, it's the brains and the horsepower that we have within our organization to develop those structures and to collaborate with suppliers and partners uh, to make it happen. And being the first compostable zipper pouch and meet the ASTM protocol is something to celebrate and something that we all should be very excited about. But it really was about how do we continuously improve and how are we continuously pushing the envelope when it comes to sustainability. The biggest hurdle with compostability within the North American market is the access to industrial composting. And that's the biggest challenge. But because of where things are, I mean, I think this is probably one of my overall largest frustrations with those outside of packaging, but those that buy packaging, is there hasn't been this significantly high rate of adoption for that solution. But hopefully we'll get there. But it's one of those challenges, and the just as you identified, those barrier levels are impressive. And the only downside to the compostable conversation is one that I think we all know, but that packaging doesn't last forever on the shelf for its inherent reason that it is compostable. So those are some of those things, but I think we're going to see more of it, and particularly where compostable makes the most sense is in food packaging where you can't clean completely, because there'd be too much residue and it would be a contamination in the mechanical recycling process. That's where it would in effect leave some food waste behind. That's where I think compostable is going to have a place to play. But also, I think when you look at some other garden applications and things like that, that there could be a tremendous potential market capture, call it, in others.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you in terms of industrial composting, because as much as we want, not many of us are going to compost at home. So it will have
Mm-hmm.
to have some kind of collection mechanism and composting for it to really catch the fancy of the majority of population
Mm-hmm.
and for it to happen at scale. What about the cost side? Are you able to come in the ballpark of customers being able to accept if they did want a compostable film, or do you think there is still time for us to be in that 20, 30, 40% ballpark? If that's the case, then people get interested. If you're double or triple of the price, then there's a challenge. How are you seeing
Yeah.
cost evolve?
Well, I think when you talk about the cost aspect of packaging and sustainable packaging, and this is one of the things that I've done a tremendous amount of research, consumer focus groups on. And anybody who says the consumer will pay more for sustainable packaging, there's the science and facts that they won't. They could say it as to feel good, but if you monitor and measure and watch how they actually spend their dollars, they won't. When you look at the U.S. population has 75% of or 77% of the U.S. population has a household income of less than $75,000, and that's traditional. Most households of four people. So these people, they need every penny, every dollar, and it sounds excessive, but it's life or death, basically. But as far as the overarching cost, I mean, when you look at a traditional barrier film versus a monomaterial barrier film, it's about market wide. It's got to be around 20% approximately more. Now that implication can be not just from the actual cost of the material, but also from the cost associated with line speed and running and things like that all play into it. but there's definitely applications where that cost is not going to be as high. So yeah, the compostable is definitely on the high side, and that's really tied to the basic economics of the raw materials, in that it's not being produced at a widely or even remotely near the rate at which traditional materials are being produced. So it's going to take time for those companies to be able to scale and to have material and to be able to produce those materials at a more cost effective way. But I do, like you kind of touched on, I do believe that we're going to get there, and I think that also is what I would tie to the post consumer recycled content resins or advanced recycling. We're going to continue to progress, and we collectively as an industry are going to get better, and that pricing will get better. But one of the keys to that pricing getting better is that the rate of adoption by brand owners has to get better. And I spoke at a conference about advanced recycling 9 or 10 months ago. And I said, at the end of the day, we need two things. We need two P's. We need price and we need POs. We need price, or I said pennies actually. We need the resin producers and those that are producing the advanced recycled materials to drop a few pennies, but we also need these brands to step up and start placing POs, because collectively as an industry, we have made tremendous strides and tremendous improvements to be able to supply them more sustainable products. But the rate of adoption just hasn't been there. And I think that for me is something that I struggle with and I get frustrated with, because 6 years ago, I would have thought we would be far further along than we are today.
Yeah, and you're so right, because 20% is not that high in the scheme of things. Of course, it appears high as a total PO kind of book.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think of per package, the packaging would typically be 5 to 6% of the cost. And if you look at, you're adding pennies. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that much. So that's interesting to hear. And I'm so happy that you actually mentioned this one aspect, which we forget when we look at packaging substitution, which is actually really, really important. It's the conversion speed. The machines are used to running at a certain speed. They
Mm-hmm.
cannot, they would not want to slow down, or you have to, when we look at the products that we are trying to substitute, we have to look at per square meter in the end. What is the cost, apple to apple, per square meter finished product? Because if you
Right.
just
Right.
look at per kg, it's different, right? It could be just 20%, but when you look at it apple to apple after the runnability and things like that, it becomes very different. So you mentioned there are certain applications which are very difficult. There are certain applications, like you said, granola and things like that, which are easier. What about markets? Are there certain people or customers that are more easy to convince? You kind of mentioned your frustration with
Yeah.
the lack of adoption, but do you find certain segments where people are, like, or certain size, maybe a bigger customer is more difficult because there's a longer chain of command? Where would you start if you were to kind of say that, okay, guys, I've cracked this, it's about 20% higher, this is what I'm going to target? What would that be?
So I think, well, not I think. So what I can tell you is, when you look at from a consumer standpoint, and really it all comes back to consumer education here, in that if we continue to ignore the consumer when it comes to sustainability, where there's many brands that are removing the how to recycle logo and removing indications of sustainable packaging, which they're providing them, but they're not including that on the package for a variety of different reasons. The longer we keep progressing without bringing them along for the ride, the more I don't want to say more bad because that's the not the articulate way to say it, but will be off because they won't understand the sustainability that we're enabling. And why I bring that up is it's tied to consumer understanding around around why materials are selected, and if you ask consumer to select packaging and which would they prefer, they would prefer, or why do they prefer that packaging? So glass, metal, or paper, consumers will tell you and they highlight them for their recyclability. But plastic packaging, they highlight for its convenience and for its ease of use. And what is so critical is that we educate, because the millennial demographic is the demographic that is most easily swayed from one side to the other when they are educated and shown why a material has been selected and why and how it is more sustainable from a scientific reason. And the millennial demographic now within the world is a demographic that has the largest buying power. And so I really believe that we need to focus on and continue to educate consumers on that, really what packaging is providing them, and that overall sustainability is enabled through the material selection.
So one of the parts that I want to understand from you is that where do you see the lower hanging fruits? If you're to introduce a new material, I'm sure as a marketing person, you think,
Yeah.
okay, these guys will be more easy to kind of they will be more open to adoption. What would
Yeah.
those industry or segments be?
But if I'm going backwards and talking specifically about the market segment aspect of your question, there is, I think, really markets like that granola cereal aspect is that low hanging fruit. I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the confection market, but I say that, and it's easy for me to say that there's a lot of opportunity in confection market, but the challenge is the of how tight the margin is on those products and how critical line speed is associated with those products. So we've got to get that dialed in, but we've got to get to the starting block in order to take it and dial it in even further. And I think that's where we need that adoption and that initiative, and those taking the opportunity to really grab the bull by the horns and make it happen. And that's where I see there's so much opportunity for, in crowded spaces, whether it's paper towels, toilet paper, candy, or anything, where there's a crowded space of people playing in that segment, where some today are moving away from showcasing whether they have recyclable materials or whether they have recycled content. Those are the market segments where people need to lean in. People need to say, hey, ours is recyclable, or we have 30% recycled content, because in crowded spaces you want every opportunity that you can find to create that separation. And really that is what we should all be seeking out. And that's also going to do things like I talked about consumer not paying more, but will consumer make a buying decision based on product that is virtually the same price? One has recycled content versus the other. Even maybe it might, but if the company doesn't put that on the package to showcase it, it's not going to be a part of that buying decision. So they may not pay more for it, but you will sell more of it because you have it.
Yeah, that's smartly put. You're right. You have to kind of be able to speak about it and tell the story, as you said. What about when you look at companies? There's large declarations by huge conglomerates
Hmm.
made that, by 2025, by 2030, they're going to do this kind of shift to a more sustainable packaging option. Uh, do you see them to be more easy to convince, or do you see smaller brands where there is a more, maybe a lower chain, a smaller chain of command to decision making? How do you see that aspect of when you're trying to promote a material?
Yeah. So I can tell you, I mean, I definitely believe those some of those smaller brands are able to make that transition much quicker. I will tell you that those larger brands, they have a much more sophisticated persona. And what I mean by that is they're not just it's not just a transactional, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to sell this. It's I'm going to buy this, but when I buy this, it's going to impact how I make this, how long I run this, and how many I can make of this, and all these different things. And what that all means is there is a major brand, a global brand, um, and there's multiple, but there's one specifically that I can use as an example, who they've promoted and they've made their claims associated with various commitments, and they've changed their executive compensation structure to include sustainability, to include enabling sustainability through sustainable packaging choices, um, and those same executives have made, in a lot of cases, the conscious decision to ignore packaging sustainability because it will impact all of their other metrics that they're being measured on, like operational efficiency, sales, just overall output. Things that are I'm using very rudimentary examples, but those are very real. And that's what really is tied to that operational efficiency and just operational speed that comes as a consequence. And so they'd rather go and blow the doors off the hinges on everything else. And when a silver bullet like solution may come to the table, they may be adopter at that point, which for me is frustrating. But at the end of the day, um, we've got to continue to strive to get as close to that silver bullet as we can.
Super. And I also see that you work a lot with industry associates, with NGOs, with policy
Mm-hmm.
advocacy. How much role are you seeing that play a part? Because I presume there will be a significant impact, as you know,
Yeah,
and you can watch from the sidelines, or you can play along with it
exactly.
and play your part. And I see that you clearly dedicate time and focus towards that. So tell us more about your work there and the impact that creates when you choose to get the right policy in place.
Yeah, yeah. So I can give you a quick example, but last year in the state of California, they had a proposed ban on plastic e-commerce packaging, and this was not just packaging that was going into the state, but it was also plastic e-commerce packaging that's coming out of the state. And so I spoke to the California legislature, and I talked to them about the fact that I went to school for material selection for packaging, to protect products. And at the end of the day, there is science and factual based reasoning behind material selection, and making and bringing bills forward without understanding the science and factual based reasoning behind and why those materials are selected is negligent. And what I also talked to them about is that right at that, and still to this day, they have two state funded packaging programs in their state of California. But they hadn't consulted with any of them, not with either of them. And I said, in essence, what you're doing is you are banning heart medication without talking to a cardiologist. And there will be unintended financial and environmental consequences for your constituents in your districts that you need to understand. And we took them through that and really showed them all that is and makes up material selection, and in particular for packaging. And we were able to defeat that. But we collectively as an industry, flexible packaging, plastic packaging, we've done a tremendous job of telling each other how great our packaging, our materials are. We've done a horrible job at educating the consumer. And what everybody needs to understand is that what are consumers? Consumers are ultimately legislators in training, because all consumers or all legislators were just at one time, and still today, even if there are legislators, they're just consumers at the end of the day. And so the better we educate them, the more and we will be able to impact. And that ties to my involvement with the Flexible Packaging Association. And when I started the Emerging Leadership Council, which was designed to really bring the industry together, the next generation of leadership, but to create opportunities to do things a little bit different. And that's through our engagement and helping to educate the younger generation. When I was growing up, it was teaching, it was all about smoking is bad and cigarettes are bad. And what do we do with that message? We take that message and we regurgitate it, and we teach our parents and we teach everybody and anybody who listen that smoking is bad. And now there's a whole lot of teaching kids that plastic is bad and it's horrible, and we need to help educate them. But in educating them, we're educating teachers, and teachers are going to take those same messages and share it, and kids are going to share those messaging. So those are all parts of it. But my involvement with the Flexible Packaging Association has been something that's been tremendous. At the end of my career, one of the things that I'll be most proud of is the Emerging Leadership Council and what it's become and how it's brought people together that wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so. But I think, like you brought up about having those conversations with legislators, you got to be willing to do the hard work, to put yourself in a little bit of an awkward situation. But that's, I think, maybe a little weird or wired, but I love those opportunities to have difficult conversations, to help educate, and to take what we know is an incredibly scientific and complex conversation and make it so that a toddler can understand it. Because if a toddler can understand it, anybody can understand it. And no matter what background those legislators may have, you can help them to understand why we'll be in a better situation. And we also, I mean, the evolution of EPR and what that's going to mean for, particularly for the U.S. is something that we have to watch. But that's why having these conversations with legislators is so important.
And I'm glad that in your home you have a couple of toddlers to practice on, right?
I do.
But that's wonderful, and I have to be cognizant of time. And there's so much we can talk, and we can just carry on. There's things that I haven't touched on, but taking the conversation towards a closure, how are you seeing especially the sustainability side of Accredo growing in the, say, maybe the next 5-year horizon? What is the kind of growth that you see, both in recycling and compostable kind of packaging substrates in the coming times? And maybe, what is the impact that you want to make in a 5-year horizon?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's one that every morning I wake up and I'm excited about, because I see all that we have at our fingertips, and what we can do to enable our customers in reaching and achieving their sustainability goals, but the all-encompassing for the industry to make sure that we're collectively leaving it in a better place than it is today, tomorrow. The technology, the people. I truly believe that we've got something tremendous to offer, and the rate of adoption is going to be more driven initially in that, call it that 5-year horizon, is going to be focused on buying packaging that has recycled, that is recyclable, and then transitioning from recyclable to recycled content. So as you have more packaging that's recyclable, it's going to feed the overall ability to have more recycled content, which if you have more recycled content, it's going to bring down the cost. So I think it's going to be a wave associated with, first, the focus will be a majority focusing on I want to be recyclable, and then working more broadly will be about incorporating recycled content. Now, there's certainly going to be the vice versa in some instances, but that's I think where we'll see a majority go.
Yeah, that's a very clear thought, and I can see that because yeah, it feeds into each other.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
To my final question, what does good garbage mean to you?
Good garbage means to me that it's good packaging. It's packaging that's provided and enabled the everyday life of the everyday consumer. It's packaging that's provided the product, its shelf life, and all the characteristics that the consumer bought that product for. Packaging enabled it, and it's just, this is such a great question, and one that I smile answering, because it's something that me and my brother have talked about many times, is that we create garbage, but good garbage also to me is good recycling. That products that one day today we're seen as garbage will be tomorrow as seen as recyclable and circular, and enabling a circular economy. So what's good garbage today, I hope tomorrow is good material for a circular economy.
That's wonderfully put. Thank you, Jason. This has been such an enlightening conversation. And like I said, we could have gone on for hours, but maybe a follow up at some
Yeah.
point. And thank you for the work you're doing, because it is people don't understand the complexity of this, and the kind of, it is the toughest nut to crack. And we can
Yeah.
talk all about the grocery bag, but that's the easy bit. Like really to change high quality food packaging and flexible substrates is where the real challenge lies. So, thank you for the work you're doing, the focus you're bringing, the kind of person you are in terms of thinking about your kids. It's just been wonderful speaking to you, and thank you for being on the show.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you having me, and thank you for all that you do, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're helping. What my number one goal is one of my number one goals is to help the consumer understand the challenge that is in front of us, and without you and your work, we would reach far less people. So I tremendously appreciate all that you do, and for having me on.